So, greetings, fellow philosophers, for our reading of Hegel's lectures on the history of philosophy. And I started the first episode with a quote of Hegel that I have chosen to demonstrate here again. And it is saying, genuine tragedies in the world are not conflicts between right and wrong, they are conflicts between two rights. And that sounds very fascinating, right? And Hegel actually said something that is in itself interesting, that is a sentence that you can use as a quote and that you can put in a listicle of the 10 greatest quotes that Hegel has ever said. But Hegel probably hasn't said that. And why is that? Because it's too easy. And an analytic philosopher would say no. And I'm sorry that I'm always bashing analytic philosophers. It's not that easy, I agree. But give me that fun, okay? But see, Hegel, an analytic philosopher, the strawman of an analytic philosopher would say, see, like truths have to be simple. If you cannot say it simple, you probably haven't understood it. But let's see what Hegel says here in his text. He says, this immediately recalls to me the old belief that truth consists in knowledge, but that an individual only knows the truth insofar as he reflects and not as he walks and stands. So truth is not something that is just immediate, that just comes to us. I'm sorry, let me show you the quote, because it's good when you can read it with me together. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to read it together. So, like, again, truth is not immediate. It's not about how somebody walks and stands, but more how he reflects on something. And that the truth cannot be known in immediate apprehension and perception. So again, we don't get it immediately into our heads or perceive it, whether it be external and sensuous or whether it be intellectual perception. So whether we get it like from a teacher who tells me, this is the truth, learn it. Or whether it comes to me during dreams or by a genius insight. But only through the labor of thought. So truth is always related. I always have to sneeze when I talk about Hegel. That may be the truth. So truth is only related to labor. And that's Hegel's point. There is not like a quote that I give to you and then you say, wow, that's what it is about. And again, like the anecdote of my student complaining, why don't you just give me the definition, for God's sake? And so for that reason, I looked for this quote and I put it in Comic Sans, because it really expresses what it is about. We can put it on an Instagram page and like give it to somebody who wants to be a motivational speaker. Nevertheless, I think there is still a truth expressed in it. And maybe it's even true for this aspect. When we do the labor of work, we come to simple sentences that then make sense for us. We need them. We need them. And so this sentence is not that bad overall. It's just not what is the essence of Hegel. And it's more about this when we really read Hegel. And when we really read Hegel, we will also encounter something like that we say, oh yeah, Hegel was right. No, wait, Hegel was wrong. Then, yeah, but in this way he was wrong, he was right. And we see that it just goes on and on and on. And that's the cycle of enlightenment. I don't know. Like we get enlightened, maybe. Okay, let's focus on the text now for real. So we want to read the lectures on the history of philosophy. We are already in our third section on that. We have said, well, there is a contradiction that we have a history of philosophy, because how can the truth be historical? Shouldn't it be immediate? Shouldn't it be eternally valid? He made some distinctions. He distinguished into an external history of thoughts where different thinkers engage in thoughts and they have a life, but then there's also true development of an intellectual truth that really relates to our lives. And he discussed that with regard to many, many different aspects. And then we finished here the first 2 pages, and he says, the history of philosophy, on the other hand, shows neither the motionless of a complete simple content. So that's what we already said. It's not just like a simple statement that we put on a quote page, but it also, not altogether, the onward movement of a peaceful addition of new treasures to those already acquired. So in philosophy, we don't just add something to an existing canon, let's say, like math, as it was back in Hegel's time. Today it's maybe also different. So we are much more challenged by the fact that we have to think that God exists, and then we have to think again, well, no, wait, God does not exist. But whoa, wait, God exists. God does not exist. And we are kind of developing in between these unanswerable positions that, as Kant would say, we cannot answer, but that always bother us. And that's why Hegel says it seems merely to afford the spectacle of ever reoccurring changes in the whole, such as finally are no longer even connected by the common aim. It just seems. So, and now we really want to look into these different opinions regarding the history of philosophy. And we start first with the view that the history of philosophy is an accumulation of opinions, and in that sense that it does not have truth. So he says here, history at the first glance includes in its aim the narration of the accidental circumstances of times, of races, of individuals, and so on and so forth. So that means that history is just an agglomeration of different events. And by the way, I was teaching history in China to students, and I looked at these books like that they gave to me, and they were just saying, and then that happened, then that happened, then that happened, then that happened. And I was getting crazy. How can you teach people like a succession of events as a history of something? The history of something has to relate at least to an intrinsic story that motivated these events, and we have to ask, how does it influence still us today? Like, why do we tell the history of the past? Because it has a relationship to who we are nowadays. So it should be clear that this is not the view of history. But many people who learn history, in my mind, already misunderstand this view, and they just engage in a pure accumulation of thoughts, which I, for my part, would reject. It's part of a history. It's part of doing a real historical analysis, but it seems not to be what it is all about altogether. And Hegel says further on that, it is contingency of content, so it's random content meshed together, which is the idea with which we have first to deal the idea of contingent actions. But thoughts and not external actions or griefs or joys form the content of philosophy. So philosophy is not about the contingent succession of historical events. Contingent thoughts, however, are nothing but opinions, and philosophical opinions are opinions relating to the more special content of philosophy regarding God, nature, and spirit. But surprise, surprise, little spoiler, you will say, philosophy, real philosophy, does not contain opinions. Thus, we now meet the very usually taken of the history of philosophy, we meet the view very usually taken of the history of philosophy, which ascribes to it the narration of a number of philosophical opinions as they have arisen and manifested themselves in time. And I noticed that when I was a young student and I went to lectures on philosophy, they were just telling me, yeah, and then this thinker thought that, and then this thinker thought that. And many people were also engaged into that kind of process, and I was just incredibly bored. I don't think that's what philosophy is about either. This kind of matter is in courtesy called opinions. Those who think themselves more capable of judging rightly call such a history a display of senseless follies, or at least of errors made by man, engrossed in thought and in mere ideas. This view is not only held by those who recognize their ignorance of philosophy. So, okay, now there are some people who say, wait, Thales thought that everything is made of water? How stupid can you be? Oh God, Fortunately, we are way ahead of these stupid people nowadays. Fortunately, we have real philosophy nowadays. I had a roommate once who thought the same. He just thought, no, that's stupid. Like, I'm an engineer. That's just stupid. Why should I think that things are made of water? But see, Thales, he had an interesting thought because he observed that things can actually change what they are. At one point, they can be this object. At the other point, they can be another object. So they are not solid as we imagine Earth to be, but they are also not just simple air. They are like water, which can be solid and which can become air. So it was a quite interesting dialectical thought that he was developing there. And this is what we should consider, that the real history of philosophy is a history of such incredibly insightful thinking. And so, yeah, people who reject the history of philosophy overall immediately, they are also recognized in their ignorance of philosophy immediately. Those who do this acknowledge it because that ignorance is, in common estimation, held to be no obstacle to giving judgment upon what has to do with the subject. For it is thought that anybody can form a judgment on its character and value without any comprehension of it whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to dismiss Hegel. That also happens often because he believed that the solar system can just have 9 planets, and now physicists say, such a stupid guy. God, such a stupid. Fortunately, I don't have to study Hegel, and I study the planets. Such a stupid guy. But they don't comprehend Hegel, right? So the history considered only as the enumeration of various opinions thus becomes an idle tale, or if you will, an erudite investigation. For erudition is, in the main, acquaintance with a number of useless things, that is to say, with that which has no intrinsic interest or value further than being known. Yet it is thought that profit is to be derived from learning the various opinions and reflections of other men. So, okay, so this is the first thing that we say, okay, let's not deal with these useless things of the history of philosophy. That's all gone. Like Aristotle is stupid, Socrates. I mean, we have Brandom, we have Zizek, we have David Richard Precht. Okay, you may not know him, German philosopher. Is it a philosopher? We have Sloterdijk. Read Sloterdijk. I tell you, read Sloterdijk. Okay, but okay, there's another opinion that we can also learn something from these philosophers, which Hegel expresses here. And this view, it stimulates the powers of thought and also leads to many excellent reflections. So dealing with these people, even though their positions are wrong, it stimulates our powers and maybe it leads to interesting reflections. This signifies that now and then it occasions an idea and its art thus consists in spinning one opinion out of the other. This is also not what Hegel thinks is philosophy about, because he wants to relate it to the truth. If the history of philosophy merely represented various opinions in array, whether they be of God or of natural and spiritual things existent, it would be a most superfluous and tiresome science, no matter what advantage might be brought forward as derived from such thought, activity, and learning. What can be more useless than to learn a string of bald opinions, and what more unimportant? This was also a problem when I felt I had to go to university. There were a lot of courses that I just took for whatever reason. I mean, this sentiment have a lot of people, right? So I may not be alone with it. And the question is, was I justified in thinking of that? And I would make some arguments for some courses for why I was justified, but maybe I was just stupid to see the bigger meaning. Okay, but let's go on. We agree that if I just read to you the history of the world as an agglomeration of facts and did the same with philosophy, that this would not be philosophy. And even if I said, it enhances your mind and makes you better to deal and succeed in a capitalist economy. Wow. Okay, so literary works being histories of philosophy in that sense that they produce and treat the ideas of philosophy as if they were opinions need be only superficially glanced at to find how dry and destitute of interest everything about them is. An opinion is a subjective conception, an uncontrolled thought, an idea which may occur to me in one direction or in another. An opinion is mine. That's because the word in German opinion is Meinung. Okay, it's like mine, meinen, Meinung. Okay, an opinion is mine. It is in itself a universal thought which is existent in and for itself. So that's just if we take it that way, it's just like something that is very subjective, that does not connect to anything other than itself. But philosophy possesses no opinions, for there is no such thing as philosophical opinions. That's what he says here, and we have to ask why. Why is that? When we hear a man speaking of philosophical opinions, even though he be an historian of philosophy itself, we detect at once this want of fundamental education. Philosophy is the objective science of truth. It is science of necessity, conceiving knowledge, and neither opinion nor the spinning out of opinions. And yeah, so I agree with that. When we do a historical philosophy, we don't kick out the idea of truth. We say truths are dependent on their historical moment. We may not know what is the outside external metaphysical reality really like. Okay, cannot maybe know something that is outside of our form of human being. We are, after all, finite human beings. Even though some people make these claims, we can always say, well, that's based on our experience, which is internal, right? But even though we say that, there may be still an idea of truth. But this truth is not related to the idea of a mind external reality. The more precise significance of this idea is that we get to know opinions only, thus laying emphasis upon the word opinion. Now, the direct opposite of opinion is the truth. It is truth before which mere opinion pales. Those who in the history of philosophy seek mere theories, or who suppose that on the whole only such are to be found within it, also turn aside when the word truth confronts them. So there are people who say, no, wait, there's no truth. There's no truth. Everything you say is utter bullshit. We are just engaging in a power struggle. But no, like even though there's no unhistorical truth, Hegel claims there's an idea of truth, and we have to look into what that means. What is truth if we cannot know mind external reality, if we can only know our minds? On the one hand, piety openly declares reason or thought to be. So we have this view, and then we also have the view that obviously reason has declared the religions to be, in a sense, superfluous. So on the one hand, piety openly declares reason or thought to be incapable of apprehending what is true, and to lead only to the abyss of doubt. It declares that independent thought must be renounced, and reason held in bounds by faith in blind authority, if truth is to be reached. Okay. Piety, that's obviously a religious concept, so I have some trouble really understanding this here. And this declares that reason... Oh, okay, this is the religious opinion that says, well, reason is incapable of approaching the truth, and actually we have faith, the leap of faith, right? I was reading it a bit wrong before. So, so if we use reason and thought, they only lead into the abyss of doubt. There's nothing to be found in reason. That's what religion says. But we deal with that later. That's what he says here. On the other hand, it is known just as well that so-called reason has maintained its right, abandoning faith in mere authority, and has endeavored to make Christianity rational, so that throughout it is only my personal insight and conviction which obliges me to make any admissions. So, reason, as the Enlightenment has progressed, has actually abandoned a certain idea of religion and tried to make Christianity reasonable. But this affirmation of the right of reason is turned round in an astonishing manner, so that it results in making knowledge of the truth through reason an impossibility. And that's what I said before. If we look at this picture again, Hegel was right, Hegel's wrong, Hegel was right, Hegel was wrong, right? He now says, okay, we made progress with regard to reason, but at the same time, the progress of reason meant a step back. It meant that we, well, maybe we progressed, but we did something right, but we turned it at the same time into something wrong. And let's therefore look at the text again. What is this wrong? Instinct and feeling are maintained by it against the true reason, thus making the measure of true value the merely subjective, that is, particular conviction, such as each can form in and for himself in his subjective capacity. A personal conviction, such as this is no more than the particular opinion that has become final for man. Okay, I want to finish here. We go on the next time. I also have to study these texts a bit more to give a better comprehensive view on that. Especially this passage, I have to understand it again. So how he actually contrasts both of them. I just want to summarize. So he wants to lead us to a position where we accept truth as the labor of our mind. I think this is what he wants to say. And this is not that we have something immediate where we say, yeah, you're right. But it's also not an intuition, or that's what I said, it's not an intuition. It is somehow related to the process of how we engage into subjects. And this is considered to be truth. But we have to read that the next time because I have to deal with the text in a little bit more detail. But so far, thank you very much. Question now today is, do you believe there's truth? What is truth for you? That would be very interesting. I hope this series helps you in reading Hegel. If you think it does, subscribe and give it a like and check out my other channels. For the rest, live long, read Hegel, and prosper. Bye-bye. To stop the recording. Here we go. Stop.